All right, I think I'm recording.
Cool.
Yeah, all right, so we're recording. All right, so good deal. So this is our second meeting for our mentorship program. Benjamin and I are working together on doing tests. So since our last meeting, a couple of things that I have done is, one, I started doing our diary on our experiences through the mentorship program. So I put in an initial kickoff meeting that we had, and then I put in information about our first meeting, put a little bit of images in there for people to read, talk about how the files were laid out and so forth. And then I put this one in today on before you can make your first pull request is you actually have to fork and clone and build the code. So I put in the steps here to do it. I also then added another video to my video playlist. Let me open that up. Hello, everyone. And it's just a short, like 6-minute video. And when you watch the video, it basically shows you step by steps what to do, what to click on, and where to click. So people have that if they want to start contributing at any place, they would have that in there. And then I just also outlined the steps here with some screenshots to show how it works. So that gives us up to date on that. Now, the one thing that I want to do is to get my first pull request put in. So we can work on doing that. But also just outside of that, we talked about writing documentation on what we've been doing on medium.com. And I created 2 different things because we talked about contributing it into 2 different publications. And on Medium, you can only contribute a story to 1 publication at a time. So I actually ended up writing 2. So I'm going to rely on you to find out who to contact about the NodeJS publication channel on Medium. And in here, what I did was I started this draft right here, and it talks about me making my original first submission to Node.js, and then answers some questions that they have, because they have a series of these articles in there, how I got into Node, and then they interview somebody. And every one of these, they ask the exact same questions. So I just copied it verbatim like that. So I think it would be very easy for them to pick that up and put it into that series. So if you know who to contact on that can get that going. All right.
Yeah, I have some thoughts. Yeah.
Perfect. And then the other one that I wrote was putting it into Free Code Camp. Well, one, because I'm an editor on their publication, and then I just got back this weekend from the first year that they did their top contributor awards, and I was on that. So I just got back from New York from that award ceremony. So I wrote one here to put in, submit it to Free Code Camp, and I submitted it this afternoon. So it may take it a couple of days before it actually shows up, but it talks about how to contribute to open source, how I learned Node.js, how I contributed to open source. My first big open source thing was through Free Code Camp, working on a project for a nonprofit that we created. And the nonprofit was called Crimes Committed Against Women. And then Free Code Camp turned our code that we created for them into a public source, open source code. So here's the link to it, and anybody can come in and contribute to it. And I talk about, I just graduated from a coding boot camp, and I contributed, and my partner is a pharmacist, he's not a programmer. He was just learning on the side. So, I mean, 2 completely different expectations on it. And then when I got into working with Node, I worked with Franzi on it, and Miles told me about the mentorship program before it actually kind of got published out. I think I was probably one of the first people to ever sign up.
Well, was Miles involved in Free Code Camp then?
No, he wasn't. He was just a contributor, and I had read about his stuff, with Node. And so as a result of that, those were the two names that I reached out. And I reached out to Francie mainly because she was a female, and I just wanted to work with another female on the project. And, she's in Germany. I think since then she's moved to New York now. But she was living in Germany at the time when I reached out to her at the beginning of the year. And she showed me how to do, contributions, look at the issues, and, you can see all the things that are in there. And we found one together, and we were able to close it out. And then I talk about the mentorship program, and then talk about how I kind of got selected because I had that first contribution that was in there already. And then when it goes live, it's going to be 6 months. And then you can sign up here, and then a link to my videos and our diary that we're keeping. So that one's been submitted. It may take a couple of days for Free Code Camp to get it and edit it, because they get so many submissions every day, and we've only got like a half dozen editors that work with it. But if you know somebody that is on the committee, we can get this one out there also, so we can have that. All right, so that said, and let me switch over to my editor. So I started out with the file that we looked at before, the makedir command and the makedir psync commands. And what I ended up doing was I went through, and these tests at the very top that didn't have, comments on them, I went through and just added comments for them so that every one of them have comments in there so that they would be similar to what you put in. And if you look at this, it opens in a different window. Let me pull it back over here. What you'll see is I made these 4 tests. I put in these comments. So the first one, make directory creates a directory using assigned path. So you can see what's in there. So this one, even though this one has tests for both makedir and makedir sync. So this is just the first one where you pass in a path and it creates, and it tests to make sure it was there. Then the next one is it creates a directory with the assigned mode value, because you're passing in this, even though that's the default value. Even if you don't put it in, that's what you're going to get anyway. And so it tests that. And then, whoops, scrolled over. Third one is now this is kind of very similar to the first one, but it's makedir, and this is makedir sync, where it creates a directory from the given path. So pretty much the same thing, but using a different test. And then the last one was, where it says makedir sync and make directory require path to be a string buffer or URL, and I just got that directly from the instructions. Everything else generates an error. So then you can see where it's doing, and it's testing it with makedir and makedir sync. So that's what I put in for comments on those. Nothing earth-shattering on that. And I thought what would be the best thing to do would be to go through tonight on the recording is see about submitting this as a pull request, just to have the first one in so that people can see that, and then work on what we want to do for the next step. And I think the next step would be to, instead of doing something like just comments, would be to start maybe trying to actually write like one of these tests myself.
Cool. That sounds lovely.
Okay.
So first thing I'm going to have you do is go to the command line. And Actually flagged you on another pull request because I was code reviewing someone today and requested that they add comments in like this. So
Oh, excellent.
you
All
should see
right.
another notification on GitHub that's similar to this. Maybe we can bring it up maybe when we submit your pull request.
Okay. So
So
what I have is I just have the changes that I've made, but I haven't committed them yet. But what I have done is I went ahead and added my upstream right here
great.
to point to the upstream itself. Now, since I've did my make and my build a few days ago, I haven't synced anything or anything else like that. I'm hoping that there's not going to be any merge conflicts when I submit mine, but I need to make sure that I pull and have everything in there correctly.
Cool. I can walk you through that too. So let's go, I guess, git status right now. And I
just have that one file.
All in one file. And you're on master right now. So let's git checkout -b and just give this branch a name that we're on.
Okay. What do we want to call it? We'll just call it make dir.
Maybe, yeah, that's fine. So now we should be on we're going to be on a new branch now. And what we can do now, just to kind of get us back in line with master, we can go git checkout master. And if we do git log right now, we're going to have, I think we'll have your commits on top of it. Let's take a look here. Oh no, we're back to a reasonable place. So what we can do is we can go hit Q, and we can go git pull upstream master. It's kind of get us in the habit of being up to date. Always a lot of work happening. And then what we can also do is git push origin master.
All right, I haven't committed mine yet.
Oh, that should be, oh yeah, this should be fine. So let's git check out the other branch first. Git check out yeah, and then git status.
And I have, instead of physically typing in git status, and I'm just going to make a comment on that for anybody that's watching the video, is I have shortcuts built in my bash profile. So instead of typing in git status, you'll see I just do GS, and that's the equivalent for me to do git status. That's the shorthand. So if you see me type in shorthand stuff, it's just because I have it in my bash profile on my Mac. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, well, let's first things first. Let's git commit with the message, and we're going to put a prefix, which is the subsystem that we're updating. So it's going to be test : and if we look at the changes on the Node project, this is just the convention. If you look at any of the pull requests, you put the subsystem. And then we're just going to describe what yeah, you can go if we want to, if you look at the pull requests, you can see it on most of the pull requests, you'll see the prefix of the subsystem. It might actually be worth looking at the doc that describes this.
Okay.
In the repo. Let me actually get Node open too on my computer so I can follow along. I believe it's in the contributing document.
Yeah. So would it be reviewing pull requests?
I think there's one where there's the format of pull requests.
The process of making changes. Commit message guidelines. The first line should contain a short description of the change, preferably 50 characters or less, be entirely lowercase. be prefixed with the name of the change subsystem and start with an imperative verb. Okay, so it would be like test colon space and then like added comments. Let's go back. Wait a minute. Hold on. Test colon add comments describing every test.
Yeah, and let's just check the length of that to make sure it's less than 50 characters, which I think is one of their requirements.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 19, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 29, 30, 32, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39.
Looks like you're well under the range. That's great. And then if it was a more complicated change set, we would follow the requirements for the additional body, which means you can put a longer description with 72 characters per line.
Yeah.
And then also reference other issues that you're closing. So you can add a refs line that says this is related to a certain issue in GitHub.
Okay.
But for a change this small, I don't think we really need to do.
Yeah, we don't have a reference to refer back on these.
Yeah.
All right. So
I think for this, that's absolutely fine. What did we miss? Oh, I think we just need to add it first.
Yeah. Wait a minute. Type it correctly. All right. All right.
Cool. And then what I'm going to do now that we've committed that change, I'm going to suggest that you go
push.
Let's check out. Go ahead and get rebase first. So let's get rebase master. Actually, we might want to wait to do that in the video. Oh, this is fine. You might want to, because we're going to do make now.
Okay.
And it's probably a little while to make because I bet we've touched a few subsystems since we last made. So let's make.
Do I have to do like /config first?
You might not have to unless anything's changed significantly in the configuration recently. So you can try without it first.
All right, so it's just make J4, correct?
Was it -J4? I think make, or is it just J4? I think it's -J4 maybe, but I might be wrong.
All right, hold on. We can answer that question.
Yeah, it's probably.
So come over here, and there is a building.
Mm-hmm.
Building. Scroll down to the right things. And you're right. Make -J4.
Cool.
And that's going to take a while to run.
Yeah, it did look like a few more things were pulled off of the main branch, so this will take a tiny little while. But the reason we're doing this is because we're going to run tests afterwards to make sure that the tests continue running. And we're also going to lint. So we're going to make sure that our code matches the coding standards of Node.js.
All right. And then, so just to put down, so while that's running, and we've got some time while that's running, I'm just going to recap everything and just write it down in my notes so that I can have it to update in our diary. So first thing I did was I added an upstream in my remotes. All right, and then we did a git pull upstream master, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we checked out a local branch. And then we committed the changes, and then we haven't pushed my changes up to my local repo yet. And then we did a make, -J4, and that's going to take a while. So that gives everybody a good idea of what it takes to make a contribution and the format. And we also reviewed the contributing docs so that we have everything correct.
And that other doc was a pull request guide, right? Or where was that?
It was under contributing, wasn't it? Let's pull back over here.
Yeah, guides contributing.
Yeah, contributing.md.
Yeah.
And in there, I went to pull request, process of making a change. And in there, it gives you, and you're right, it's the guides / contributing. It tells you get add, get commit, and then it basically comes in here where we talk about the message guidelines. And if we had more to put in than the 72 lines, what the process is that we would put in a second line that's blank, and then we keep adding to our commit message on line 3, with each line with having a maximum of 72 characters, correct?
Correct, yeah. And then one additional blank line, and then refs if you do have anything to reference or fix.
And you would have a reference if you were actually closing something that refers to a pull request. Okay. Perfect. All right, excellent. I think this is great. Let me come back over to my IntelliJ. And of course, that's still running, and it will probably be running for another 15 or 20 minutes. But then I think the next thing for us to work on, or at least my suggestion, and I'm open to any other good suggestions that you have, would be to pick a file that would be one that would be easy to start writing my very first test itself.
I think that's a good idea. So what I think we should do, and I guess this video will be multitasking a little bit while that builds. But what I was thinking we could start with is look at Node's daily test coverage. And it looked to me like, I just need to find where that is. I think we shared the link last week. Looked like the FS Promises library could use some more coverage. Whoops, I need to make my computer not do that. Let's see here. I know I sent you a link to it last week.
Oh. You just want the code coverage?
Yeah, and they publish it online. I just need to remember where.
Yeah, here we go. So this is it.
Lovely.
All right, yeah. So we want to just start with August 20th, which is today.
Yeah, and so yeah, if we click the coverage, I think last we checked, if we look in internal FS, and look at the promises.js, see, if we look there, it only has about 72% coverage of branches. So if we scroll down a bit in this file, I think we actually saw a few methods we just aren't writing tests for yet.
So here is one line.
Yeah, and that looks more, I think if we go down, we might even see something more glaring. Let's see. That's interesting. Oh, that's an interesting one.
This one?
Yeah, what's going here? Well, let's do one that's not McDur, because that's what we've been rating all the new stuff for, and that hasn't landed yet. But that looks like a good candidate.
Okay.
So we can think about that one. Is there anything else?
All right, hold on. I'll keep scrolling. Let's see if we can find.
Oh, that one's interesting. I kind of like LCH mod. I think might be more interesting because the only reason I don't want to do McDur yet is because that pull request is my own and it still isn't quite ready to land yet.
Okay.
It might not be worth writing tests for it if there's still some changes that need to happen to it.
Okay.
But
So
this looks like a great candidate.
L change mod is where you've created a directory local and you're changing the permissions on it on that directory locally, correct? LCH mod.
Yeah, let's look. I'm looking it up now in the NodeJS file system API.
Documentation.
Yeah. And the other thing I'm curious of is has anyone written a test for it already and it just hasn't landed yet? So I'm just going to also look through open pull requests. I don't see any open pull requests that have the word LCH mod in them. So I don't think we're going to be stepping on anyone's toes. I think it changes the permissions of, because chmod changes the permissions of a file. Does this change the permissions of a symlink?
LCH mod, history, no arguments, others only available on the Mac OS.
Oh, that's interesting.
It doesn't give you a lot of information about it. It gives you a little bit about the history on it. And then there's an LCH mod. But I thought that was changing. I thought that was the equivalent of changing the permissions on a file locally. Or it's not, I mean, not on a server.
Well, because there's also chmod as well, right?
All right, let's just.
Oh, there we go. LCHmod is similar to chmod, but does not follow symbolic links.
Okay, that's good. All right, excellent. So you got to it faster. Perfect.
Yeah. But then my question, but because it says it only works on OS X, that could actually be, that might mean it's impossible for us to actually hit that line of coverage because I think the test coverage is done by a Linux machine.
Oh,
so I wonder if that's actually true. Why do Linux POSIX have it's shown but no LCH mod?
Because they don't have symlinks? Yes. I don't know.
Let's take a look at, let's go back one and let's look at the actual FS API, not the non-promise version. Oh, sorry, in the test coverage area. I want to see if we're successfully hitting if we go to the test coverage listing again, the coverage.nodejs.org in the web browser. Go hit the back button. I want to see if we've successfully got test coverage for LCH mod in the non-promise version of the API. So that will be the, I think, up one file. And then there will be just, I would have thought it would be an internal FS. Is there no?
It wouldn't be under streams.
Let me see here. That should be under.
Would it be under util?
It should just be under lib/fs. Oh, it's, it's just libfs. It's not under internal. So there should be just fs there. I guess we have to go up one level, yeah. Oh, it should be in there. And then internal. Yeah, internal test, internal REPL, internal process.
Would it be under root?
Yeah, let's see what's in root. Yeah, and then there should be just an fs.js. There we are. Let's look for LCH mod in here. Did we actually, or sorry, yeah, LCHmod. Well, look at that. Yeah, so what's kind of killing us here, I think the reason it's saying that it's not covered is because we're running in Linux for our test coverage, unfortunately.
Okay.
So what does this mean for us? And that might be also why people haven't written a test for it, is because they didn't want to have to only write a test for OS X. That still might be a good candidate for writing a test for, though. We just won't get that exciting kind of hit the missing line of code on Linux. So, well, let's take a look at promises once more and see if there's anything else that jumps out at us that would be cross-platform, because that'll just be that'll be more exciting just in terms of payoff.
All right, scroll down to wherever we were. I think we covered that.
Yeah, I mean, that one was an option. LCHmod, we think only works on OS X, so maybe let's
see what else.
Something else, yeah. What was the one that looked like an edge case near the top? There was one that just some of it hadn't been covered. It might have just been we were missing a test case for it.
We've got just the throw here.
I think that will be pretty hard to
test on the throw.
Test, yeah. Rate file handle, I think that one will be kind of hard to test too.
Here's another throw, size equals 0.
Well, that one could be interesting. What was the size equals 0 one?
So you're trying to read a file handle, and you're getting, I guess this is the direct path to the file, any options, which are optional, and then
this one's hard to, this one's really hard to test because we'd have to have a testing file that's bigger than the maximum file size, which sounds terrible. So we'd have to create like a massive file. That does not sound fun. So let's that's not easy. Maybe we scroll down a bit. Let's see here. What do we got here?
So you're trying to read from a file, and you open up a buffer to read. Make sure that your handle is valid. You've got a buffer. And I guess what it's checking is the length of the file.
This looks easy to do. And so this looks like something you'd have a test, yeah.
So that would be where it's trying to read in an empty file.
Yeah, this doesn't look too bad, does it?
Yeah, so all you would have to do is just create a file and put nothing in it.
Well, I think this is a buffer, so I think we can just create a new buffer and have 0 in it, maybe.
Okay.
Let's look at the file FS API. And it's a read method. You can even look at the promise one.
Oh, great. There's only like 30 bazillions of them. I found it. Yes, easy.
Yeah, that doesn't look too bad. I was looking to see if they had it documented in the FS promises API too. Let's see if it has any slightly different. Oh, I found it. How am I missing it? I'm just bad at reading. Oh, that's very weird. I think I also found missing documentation.
Are you looking at the online documentation like I am?
Yeah, I am. Interesting. Might have found some additional work that we could do.
All right, and our make is still running.
Cool. Well, I think, so there's fs.read, which is great.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing fs promises.read, which makes me think that maybe someone just forgot to document it. Or I'm missing something.
Well, it does say down here at the bottom, if this method is invoked as util.promisefy, it returns a promise for an object with bytes read and buffer properties. But I don't think that's what you're referring to, right?
No, there's a second promises API. If you look in that file for FS uppercase P, there's an FS promises API. Here we are, and it's experimental. And then they have additional, they document everything in kind of the promises API there. And it's not quite ready for public consumption yet.
Yeah, especially if it's a level 1, which is what that says it was, stability 1.
Hold on here. I'm gonna get into the node directory as well.
So it's this one right here is the promises one.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you found it. Cool.
Yeah.
How was I missing it?
It's if you
I
go.
see. You have to have created a file handle first. Interesting.
File system promises API.
Gotcha. I understand.
And it's under file handle.read.
Gotcha. Okay, looks like we can pull this off. So if we look at test/promises, or test FS promises, I should say.
So should I do test FS promises file handle read?
I'm looking right here in the test-fss promises file. They've basically written tests for the whole FS promises API. It's called test-fs-promises.js.
Okay, got it open.
And I see a test of that very method on line 96 is where it starts.
I have 96 const buffer. So line 99 is the actual test.
Yeah, and I think we basically want to add an additional test that would try a buff length of 0, which should hit that line of code that's never hit. See what it does for, oh, buff is already declared. So we have a, where are we? First thing I would be doing would be, so I'd be probably copying lines 96 through 101, but we kind of want to do this on a different branch so that we don't muck with what we're doing already, but surprised that's taking so long to build.
See, this is like, okay, manager, if you're watching this video to this point, now would be a good time to buy me a faster computer. No.
my home computer takes a sweet time too. It's a good time to go get coffee.
Yeah, if anybody's reading this, feel free to write in the comments below, buy Jennifer a new faster laptop.
Here, why don't I, oh, you're recording the screen, so I can't screen share right now.
Yeah, so that's okay. But what I'd like to do is to try to write it myself this week. And then if I do get stuck, I'll send you what I've got and you can give me hints, because what I want to do is to try to go through and write my first one. And then in case I get terribly lost, then I can ping you and do this. But I think this is a good one when people are watching this to see where we did exactly what we did, where we went through the code coverage, found things that were missing, looked at it, looked at the documentation to see what was covered, then get an idea of what needs to be tested, found the correct test file to go in to look at. And then once we found that test file, then we just discussed what we needed to do to be able to do that.
That sounds great. And what I was going to say too is kind of, you see how this is, this fits well with the first task we did, because you see how these test cases all just sit in the global scope.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing we can be doing is putting them in mustache brackets to lexically scope them, just like we were doing in the other file, because otherwise these variable names collide. What those brackets are doing is they're just lexically scoping it so that you can reuse the same names, like path name. If those were both not in brackets, then path name would be an error because it's in the same scope, and you can't have two constants in the same scope.
And you're able to do that. So go ahead and explain that for the people that are watching. Why, because most people, when they see curly braces, they sometimes think, oh, there's an object and I don't have a key value pair when you start looking at this test. And then they're like, oh, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. And then it's like all these things are like that, where they are enclosed in curly braces. So explain to them again why that is, that it has that and all the tests. Because if you start collapsing them down, you start collapsing all of them down, you'll see that all of them are like that.
Yeah.
They're enclosed from curly braces.
Yeah, the reason that they're doing this is you can use curly braces are usually part of an if statement or part of a function.
Right.
It can just be used to declare an arbitrary block, which is what's happening here. So what they're doing is they're saying this code inside these curly braces is just in a different block, which means it has different lexical scoping, which means that the constant .path name in between the curly braces is not going to collide with something with the same name in one of the other sets of curly braces, because you can only have one variable named that constant in one scope.
Perfect. So what people will see is this is the scope right here. You've got this constant called path name that you've assigned a value to it. Then in this test, in this scope right here, you repeat that exact same variable name, and you give it a completely different value. Well, the value that you give here doesn't override this one at all. And so when people start looking at that, because most people, when they're writing tests, they don't do that. And so when they first see that, that might be something that they're confused with that it's doing.
And what's kind of nice about this, if we look in the other file, test fs promises, which is near the top, instead of doing this, they're creating buff1, buff2, buff3, buff4, and this makes it harder to reuse code, right?
Yep.
So it's actually a lot nicer if you use the approach that we saw in that other file, because you can kind of use each test as the foundation for the next test without having to change all the variable names. And also there's the danger that you don't see the difference between these two tests because you accidentally delete the white space on line 102 or something, and now suddenly it looks like
it's all one test.
Yeah. So it just is a nice way of, and if you look at a lot of test suites like TAP or Mocha, they do this by having the test be a function, and you kind of describe in the start of the function, you describe the test, and then you have a closure that has something you might call when the test is done, or maybe an assertion framework gets passed in or something. In the test fs McDir, they're doing something similar, but without a testing framework, which is just to logically group the things in these lexical scopes. And I like that approach a lot better than what's being done in test fs personally.
Perfect.
It starts to provide some organization.
Okay.
Oh, and our build just finished, so we can
Yep.
actually do a pull request before we.
Exactly. Since we got 10 minutes left, so let's see if we can pull this off in 10 minutes.
Cool. So what I was going to have you do is first run the tests that you added comments to. You didn't change any of the tests, so nothing should be broken, but it's a good habit to get into. So we're going to run /test.py. No need for make. Just
so
/test /tools, sorry, /test.py, which is the test runner.
Like that?
So I brought mine up. I can't quite see it because your screen. There we go. py. It's a Python file.
Oh, got it.
Yeah. Space, and then the name of the test is going to be no need for dash.
Oh.
Yeah, we can just give it the name of the file, and it's going to be. You don't actually give it the. That might work actually. Try that.
Shoot, I didn't. Okay.
Try that. I don't know if that. What's wrong here? It's ./tools, not tool. Sorry. And yeah, it doesn't find it. So you need to go. This is just kind of not completely self-explanatory. Get rid of the .js. And I think it still won't work because we need to give it the folder it's in. So yeah, so we're going to go up, but we're going to actually go parallel. Sorry. Yeah, just parallel / because this is in the parallel tests folder. Yeah, there we go. So that did run it. And the reason for that was that this test is in the subfolder parallel in the test folder. And it also wouldn't work if you gave it the folder test though, so it's just a little confusing. But what this says is our tests are still running. That's great. And that's the test file you modified. And then the next thing we can do is we can run a make lint, which is going to make sure that we haven't modified anything stylistically such that it doesn't match our linting rules.
So just this command?
Yeah, that should work. And I don't think any of your lines, the only thing that when you're adding comments that might throw off the linter is it requires every line is under 80 lines, I believe, or I don't know if it's 80 or 72.
Oh, I'm going to have one that's going to go over then.
And this should tell us, so we'll know right away.
Okay. I should.
I wasn't sure if that was or not because I thought the right-hand gutter was usually set to 80 characters and.
I think on my IntelliJ, I think I have it set to 120.
Okay, cool.
So that's why my tear line is way over here. And IntelliJ, it's one of those things you go and you set it once, and it's like it's going to take me a while to figure out how to change it back to 72. Mm-hmm.
What I'll sometimes do when I'm just testing, like if you copy that whole line. Oh, there we go. Great.
Yeah, line 6, and we were right. It's on this one. So can we make this 2 lines?
Yep.
Or
I would in a perfect world, I'd eventually get your gutter to 80, which will make your life easier.
Yes. Yeah, we do 120 at work, so that's why I have it set at 120. Yeah. So I will make sure that I'll put that in my notes. My gutter to 80 to have that for next time.
Yeah. Cool. And then what you can sometimes do, what I'll sometimes do if I am just testing, especially when I'm writing commit messages too, is if you just copy the text of line 66, just the text part, not the /. I'll sometimes just open up a node terminal in the terminal. So just type node to create a REPL.
This. Let me get rid of this.
And I'll use, when I'm developing, I'll just put double quotes or single quotes around that. And
do .length on it.
Yeah. I use REPLs all the time for any number of things when I'm, because I'm not good at counting, I guess. That's the answer.
I would have 63. I would have put it in Microsoft Word and let it tell me what the word count is. But it's nice. I never thought about doing it from a programming standpoint.
Yeah. I'll use the REPL, especially if I'm doing kind of more complicated stuff in any code base. I'll usually try to kind of test my hypothesis in the REPL and then eventually write code if I've got something worked out in the REPL. So it's a really good developer tool. So if we run makelint now,
I was thinking maybe I could do it on one sentence, but
we should be well under the limit now, which is good. So what would happen if we hadn't fixed that would be that we would have failed all the tests. So what we can do now is we can actually push this though. So if we get stat, just make sure. Oh, we have one change, so we're going to commit that one change.
All right. So now, do I just push this up to my local branch?
Yep, push that up to your local. Or push that up to your own remote.
I got to take a space out. End user typing error.
And then what we can do is you can go to github.com and go to the Node project.
And then do a pull request.
And it actually already has it in the UI there because you were one of the most recent people. So you can even just click the button there. And then it's probably going to make you're probably going to use your commit message as the pull request message from the first commit. So add comments describing every test. I would grab that there, which you kind of see in the Git history at the very bottom of your screen. Test add comments describing every test. Down a bit. You see that? Yeah.
Yeah.
I've used that as the commit title. What we can do is squash it at a later date and make it into one pull request. Then these checkboxes here, commit message follows commit guidelines. That's true. So you can add an X there. Maybe don't add an X yet because we're going to squash it to make it. Yeah, let's not add an X yet because we'll squash this into one moment.
Okay.
No, you don't need to. You can get rid of the line that says documentation changed or added because we're not adding or changing any documentation for this type of pull request. And you can probably get rid of the tests and or benchmarks are included so all we're going to be doing is making sure we follow the commit guidelines and make test J4 a test. We're going to do that. If we scroll to the top of this commit message now, right above the checklist, if you just hit enter a couple times or above the comment, it doesn't really matter because the comment's not going to show up. You can say we're, however you want to describe it, we're adding tests. We're making the tests throughout the entire file more consistent in terms of how they're described or something.
All right, how's that? I just put providing consistency in tests by adding comments to describe the test functionality.
That sounds great to me.
We'll even have it proper English too.
So we can go ahead and open that poll, and then I'm going to share. If I share my screen, will you be able to record it? Because I'm going to show you one additional step that people don't usually get to see.
All right. So do I go ahead and create the pull request?
Yeah, go ahead and create the pull request. And we can walk through. What we'll do is we'll probably squash those two commits into one at a later date.
Okay.
But what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with you, and I'm going to show you what happens.
All right, I stopped sharing.
Cool. I'm going to show you what happens on the contributor side when we're ready to, get close to being ready to land your pull request. Can you see my screen?
I can.
So there's a CI which contributors have access to. I'm going to go to github.com/node and find your pull request that just got opened.
And CI is continuous integration for anybody that's watching that doesn't know.
So I'm going to go ahead and grab your pull request number, which is required. And I'm going to just kick off build with parameters, certify that this is safe, which is what we say to say that I personally checked your code to make sure that there's not a virus that would bring down all of Node's build servers here. So just looks like just comments, so we're good. So you don't want to willy-nilly just be running a test. And then I'm going to put the PR ID in, and I'm going to go ahead and click build. Then what we're going to see a few moments later on your pull request should be that we see a build server kicking off. So let's wait 2 seconds here. So Travis kicks off automatically on every new Node pull request now and does perform a smoke test for the pull request. But what I was doing was kicking off the larger suite of tests.
It's now saying it started. So it's pending running test.
Oh, here we go. So what I did is kick off this node test commit here.
Yep.
And that has to be done. And we're going to see more start coming in.
Yep.
This is done by a contributor on the project. And it basically kicks off the full suite of servers that you need to have passed tests on before you land the pull request to the project. And so once all these are green, it can take a few hours. It means that you're actually will be in a pretty healthy place for landing this change. Other things worth mentioning is the policy is to wait 72 hours before we land a pull request. So we'll put it out to some folks and just let people review it. I will review it within the next 72 hours and give a thumbs up. The only thing that I would probably comment on right now is we should probably squash these two commits into one commit message, with the content being this top commit message. And that's all there is to it. We should see the test start passing within an hour or so.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, excellent. I think this was a very productive hour on here. So it's good to see me getting my first commit, my first pull request pushed in. And then hopefully in, like you said, 72 hours, it will be approved and will be put in. So that, for everybody that's watching, it's very simple to find something. Doesn't have to be big, major, that you can actually do to contribute, to open source and to get it going. So my goals before our meeting next week, which will be our third meeting, is to go in and look at the fspromises.js file, and look at writing a test where the buffer length is 0, meaning you've got an empty buffer, and have it test that and make sure that that goes in correct. So that, instead of and making my next step forward, going from the easy writing comments to actually writing my very first test for Node.js. So we will record that in our third meeting to get that going. And then hopefully I'll have, after that, some more tests going down the line. And then if you'll just check with somebody on the article to put in the Node.js side, that would be good, and we can submit that. And then hopefully Free Code Camp will have the other articles published, And once we do that, when we put this out on the video playlist on YouTube, I will just, below the video, I'll have links to everything so that people can look at it. Anything,
awesome.
Anything else we should be working on?
Just while you're rating, if you are running ahead and rating kind of that first test this week, I would look into how to run with test coverage so that you can see locally whether or not you have hit that line of code that you want to hit.
Okay.
There is documentation there. We looked at it briefly in our first video, but there is some documentation there on how to do so.
Okay.
I think you basically run make coverage. I always have to read the document too. And then we can actually see if we're actually hitting the hypothesized line that we think we're hitting with the test case. Yeah, but other than that, I think that's all from me.
All right, perfect. So that will definitely cover everything that we need, that we should be covering for the third week. And so that will be putting us about 75% of the way through on the first beta phase. So we've got really 2 more, I guess, scheduled meetings in case or if we go further than that, but at least 2 left. Is there any other topics that you want us to make sure that we cover before the end of the beta program that we need to make sure that we take care of either next week or the week after that?
I think I'll have to think on that. I don't think there's anything off the top of my head. I think if we can show kind of a pull request from start to finish, that'd be really healthy. That'd be good, kind of showing that I think especially for a month, for only having a month, I think that's pretty reasonable. Because bigger pull requests can take 30 days themselves to land, right? So it's kind of, you have to be somewhat. We have to have an appropriate amount of ambition.
Okay.
But, I think it might be good for. I think just if you're feeling comfortable to start running and finding stuff you're excited to work on will be the kind of the litmus test that things are going good, right?
Yep.
And I think what else? I don't know, just not being afraid to reach out to people, because I'll happily, even after the mentorship program, I'm quite happy to help either chime in on pull requests you're working on, or provide review, or provide help navigating the code base. I still, I'm a relatively new contributor to Node, but I have worked on it on and off for years at this point. But I still kind of am not shy about talking to some of the key technical people when I'm doing more difficult technical things. I'll just Slack them or whatever and say, I'm trying to do something with, actually specific example, I'm trying to do something with the inspector right now. And I've been talking to Anna, who has done a lot of work on the inspector, to get advice on how to navigate through that part of the code base. So I think take away, don't be embarrassed to ask questions. It's the really important thing.
And I think it's great that you just said that, because in the 2 articles that I wrote, I talk about getting into open source, and a lot of people think, oh, it's going to be too hard. I don't have programming skills good enough to do that. I did my very first contribution to Node.js where I just looked at who were the contributors, found the names, started clicking on their names, and some of the GitHub repos include people's email address or their Twitter handler or their website if they have one. And I found 2 people with their email listed and reached out to them, and that's how I got my first contribution in. So yeah, it's not, people aren't going to rip your head off if you ask, I'd like to contribute. Can you help me out to get started? They're more than willing to jump at this, to help you out. So don't be afraid to do it. As Benjamin said, that's how I'm here, is because that's exactly what I did.
I think, yeah, that's how I still approach it a lot of the time. It's so good to talk to people before you actually do things. And I think the only reason someone might not answer you isn't because you asked a silly question or anything. It's usually that they're super busy or haven't looked at the project in a long time. I think almost everyone appreciates people reaching out to them. So it's because first of all, it's really nice to have help from people, because one thing that everyone lacks is time. So,
yep.
Well, lovely. So.
All right,
All right.
I'm going to go ahead and stop